Hey everyone, I'm Greg Nettle and I serve as president of Stadia Church Planting. We're going to wait just a couple seconds here as people jump on with us. This will be a lot of fun today talking about one of my favorite subjects, and that's financial stewardship development. We have a very special guest that's joining us as well. We're expecting quite a lot more people, so I'm just going to wait a couple seconds, get your coffee, settle in. I think we're going to have a very meaningful time together. We do have the chat feature opened. It will only be used though for questions, and we'll get to your answers then within the webinar. But please use that. Feel free to ask as many questions as you would like, and we'll try to get to all of those throughout our time together today. Hey everyone, we're going to get started in just a moment. I'm Greg Nettle and I serve as president of Stadia Church Planting. About 6 months ago, Stadia gathered a group of leaders from across the country for a blue sky session out in Estes Park, Colorado. We brought in tech leaders from all over the country, both from the business world and from the church world, to talk about the potential that digital online church expressions could have in the future. Little did we know that that future would be compressed to a matter of weeks. As a result of that blue sky session, Stadia walked away saying, we have to invest in this. We have to start building our digital team. And so we did. We brought Jeff Reed onto our team. Jeff is kind of the LeBron James of the digital world. And so he's assembling his team to look at how do we plant churches digitally? How do we help existing churches with their digital online process? And so we were moving forward with this rapidly, and now very rapidly putting energies into this. And so we do have some things to share with you with that. But as a result of that, it positioned us, God positioned us to kind of speak into these times well in advance of these times hitting. So I'm absolutely delighted today that we can answer your questions via chat, but we have a very special guest with us, Julie Bullock, who's a senior consultant for Generis, really one of the financial advancement leaders in the industry throughout the United States. And Julie has been a friend of mine personally. Gosh, Julie, for a long time. I don't even remember when we met, quite frankly. But I'm so grateful that you're here with us today, especially in light of the fact that you broke both ankles yesterday.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for my backdrop of my headboard. My feet are both elevated right now, so thank you for your grace. But I'm good to go. I'm only lightly medicated, so I can still be coherent. Just lightly.
Good to know. Good to know. So, Julie, give us a little bit about your background in the financial stewardship industry.
Sure. Well, I've been working with Generis almost a little over 11 years. And so we serve churches all over the U.S. in the area of generosity development. Prior to that, I worked at Wheaton College on their development team, kind of working in the Christian financial stewardship from a higher education side of things. And then even prior to that, I was the stewardship pastor at Community Christian Church in Chicago with Dave and John Ferguson. And so very, very passionate about stewardship in the local church. And I'm involved in my own church in that area as a lay leader. And just really, now more than ever, just a really important time to make sure we're building up our disciples and in this area of giving. So that's just a little bit about my background.
Yeah, and you also serve on the board. You're a board member at Stadia, and so you're speaking into Stadia's financial development frequently, as well as all things Stadia. So there's so much more to Julie than just the financial realm, but that's certainly your publicized area of expertise. Okay, Julie, so I think one of the big questions, and certainly as president of Stadia, I'm asking this same question, is kind of what can we expect right now, where most of us listening and joining this webinar are leaders in the nonprofit world, specifically in church planters, existing churches. When these challenging times come, what's been your experience?
Yeah, well, first I'll humbly say, I have never been through anything like this ever. I think none of us have. I mean, so I'll just humbly say that I don't have any of the concrete answers. I'll just kind of humbly share kind of what we're thinking right now. Sure. The closest thing I can, and truly there's nothing like this that's ever happened, but I'll just in a kind of a similar way, talk about 2008, whenever kind of the last kind of major recession hit. And, this is just what I want to encourage us in. It's better to be leading people to prioritize their giving right now than to not. And so often in these times, we think, okay, we need to be respectful of people. We need to not talk about giving right now. It would be insensitive. It would be tone deaf. And I resonate with all of that, because there is a right way and a wrong way to do it. We absolutely do want to be sensitive to people. We want to remind them we serve a God of grace. We want to remind them that God knows their situation. They don't need to defend themselves to anyone about their giving and how it's changing or whatever. But we as church leaders, now more than ever, is when we do want to be guiding them in the biblical principles of stewardship. We don't want to be being silent on this topic. And so, even when again, nothing like this has ever happened. But when I think back to 2008 and to some of the times when harder financial times have come, those are the times when churches that spoke in boldly to their people in this area weathered that storm better than churches that just let off the gas pedal and said, we're going to not talk about it for a while and just let people breathe. I totally get the heart behind that. Absolutely. And I resonate with that. And there is a right way to do it, though, to speak into these people's lives.
So Julie, it's, fascinating, because as I've traveled around the world, and, we plant churches in some of the deepest areas of poverty around the world, when I interact with people who are in financial hardship, which is largely where we plant globally, one of the things that we've learned is you can't outgive the poor. It's very, very fascinating that in that experience, when people are in very, very hard times, they actually have a tendency to be even more generous. Yeah. Do you find that to be the case in the United States?
Yeah. So here's the thing. People will generally follow where you lead. And so, I'll remind us of the biblical example of the churches at Macedonia. So I think many of you as pastors and leaders probably know this passage very well, but just in case you need a refresher, 2 Corinthians 8 is when the Apostle Paul does speak about these three churches in Macedonia, the region of Macedonia, the church at Philippi, the church at Thessalonica, and the church at Berea. And they were in extreme trials and poverty. And out of that, it welled up in rich generosity. The Apostle Paul says they gave beyond their ability. They gave entirely on their own accord. And he says it exceeded our expectations. So Paul and Titus were just, it exceeded what he thought they would do. But verse 5 is the kicker. In verse 5, he says, they gave themselves first of all to the Lord, and then by the will of God to us. We've got to be bold about leading people to connect with God in this season and not making the decision for them. And if we don't take away anything else today, I just want to encourage you with that. When we have low expectations and we expect that people are going to hold back, and we even say anything like that, it can very easily become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we say, hey, I know many of you are not going to be able to give as you usually do, don't say that. It will kind of place that on people. It's like if I were having a baptism service and I were to say, I know many of you are going to be afraid to get baptized today and you're not going to want to do it. And that's okay. I would never say that. I want to be bold. I want to invite people while knowing that people are going to have their own paths. We want to make sure we're encouraging people to engage with the Lord. And so I do want to encourage us when we lead them in that way, when we lead them to be bold in that way. We're not defining outputs, and it's really important. We're not saying how much they need to give. We're not defining their percentage. We're encouraging them on their inputs. And the input of that discipleship is their engagement with the Lord, both in this area and in others.
Yeah, so, when we look biblically and historically, I think what we see, and in our experience as well, is when things are at their worst, the church is at its best. And we can't underestimate God's people and God's generosity. Julie, you did an exercise with our team a couple of years ago. You had us seated at round tables, 6 to 8 people at a table, and you actually asked us to share a time when we had been sacrificially generous and how that made us feel. And it changed my view of how our expectations of people and how we should invite them into generosity. Because as we went around our table, I had one guy that said, we'd been saving up to buy a boat. They had like $15,000 and we decided to give it to help plant a church, and we had somebody else said we were in a capital campaign and we gave away our retirement. But everybody had this great story, right? Including myself. And we were all sharing it, and everybody was in tears, and they were saying it was the best time of our life. It was absolutely one of the most important things that God ever led us through. And so in this time, I think we can ask boldly and without fear, because people will respond.
You're exactly right. And I just want to encourage you. I mean, the way in which so church leaders and pastors, the way in which you and your family are responding in this, I just want to encourage you. Vulnerability is so key. And so for you to even just share a little bit of your own story, and I don't know everyone's story. Some of you might have a spouse or children. I mean, this might be a really challenging time for you, just as it is for other people with kids out of school, or maybe some of you are dealing with actually a medical challenge right now with the coronavirus, or a relative that has it. And there's lots of things people are dealing with right now. And for just you to encourage that vulnerability, and I just want to encourage you with this, just don't put amounts and percentages on things right now. It's just not helpful. And I actually don't think it's helpful anytime. But for you to share, just like those churches in Macedonia, what it is that you're giving from, and just the heart that you feel right now. And we want to just encourage people, don't disengage. Now is not a time to disengage with the Lord or with generosity, but don't define what that output needs to look like for somebody, because it may be very different than what it looked like 2 months ago or 2 weeks ago, but to engage with the Lord on that input.
Julie, let's talk about online giving just a little bit. What should we be looking for? Should everybody be doing that? Where are we at with that now?
So here's what I'd encourage you. I know probably it's all across the map as far as what your churches currently have, as far as what percentage of people give online. And I would imagine many of you, through the great leadership of Jeff Reed, or even just already several of you having a great experience to stream or to pre-record from last weekend, I would imagine you saw a bump in online giving during this time. Here's what I want to encourage you. We've got a lot of churches that we did this with this past week and saw some really great results. Couple of things with this. So first of all, there are people in your church, all of you I'm sure have them, that do give by paper. They give by check, and whether it's through a giving box or whether it's through a bucket that gets passed or through the mail, there are people in all of our churches that are giving by check. And so what several churches did this past Monday or Tuesday, we sent out an email to those families targeted. Hey, Bob and Barb, I want to encourage you. You are one of the families at ABC Church that is faithful to give by check. Thank you for your faithfulness. During this time when we are meeting virtually, I want to encourage you that there are 3 ways you can worship the Lord through giving. So number 1 is you can go online, and here's the link for that. We also are providing a phone number or an email of a man or a woman, depending on who your financial secretary is, who will walk you through that. They can help do it for you, just depending on who the person is. You don't know what the barriers are of why they're not giving online, so they can do that. Item number 2, and this might feel old school to everybody, but I want to tell you, we had a lot of people take us up on this at churches that did this on Monday and Tuesday. Number 2, if you would like to continue giving through check, click here, and there's a form on our website that you can fill out, and you can just put your name, your address, and we will mail self-addressed stamped envelopes to you. And I know that sounds old school, but there are some people, we want to affirm that they want to give through check. So don't try to get everybody online right now. I think a lot of people are going to go online. It's going to be a huge win in so many ways, but we want to affirm it's not wrong to give by check. And some people, they don't have stamps at home. They don't have envelopes at home, and they're not going to go get them. We want to affirm that that's okay. So you can click here, fill out this form on our website, name, address, and then tell us how many envelopes you want. You want 8, you want 4, you want 2. And then the third option, some churches are doing, it's up to you guys, is, hey, if you're wanting to get out of the house, we have a drop box on the side of the building. Here's where it is, and you can drop it in. So I do want to encourage you, while this is a massive opportunity to get people giving online, it is not the end all be all. And we need to be real careful. There are large percentages, some of them are bigger givers, that are giving by check, and we want to be really affirming of how they can do that. And by serving them and saying, we'll send you some self-addressed stamped envelopes, that's just a great way of affirming that desire.
So, Julie, some of the church planters, I think all of the Stadia church planters, they launch now with giving online and so forth. But I mean, at River Tree that I led for 25 years, it was a process of moving people to that and what platform do we use and so forth. So, if somebody's out there and they literally haven't even launched online giving, what are some of the best tools and strategies to get started with that?
Yeah. So the great thing, a lot of those providers right now are offering discounts because of this situation. So I know Give is GYVE. Give is offering significant discounts to churches to do that. PushPay is, they're kind of doing it based on your situation and your size. And so I know many of you are aware of PushPay. They are definitely the most user-friendly. They are definitely also the most expensive. So full disclosure, but they're very user-friendly. A lot of churches using them. And then a lot of churches are really using Tithely, Tithe and then LY, just like it sounds.
Yeah, Tithely's the one a lot of our church plants use. And I,
Awesome.
we're not getting kickbacks from any of this stuff, but that's been a good company as well. We've used PushPay and so forth.
Yes.
Yeah. So they get this. How do they go online and just find these companies?
Yeah. So the best thing to do, yeah. And I mean, I think Greg probably has a couple contacts. We can even post them on the resources page of this webinar. We have some direct contacts that you guys can connect with there. But the biggest thing I would say is just going to be the personal of walking people through it. So I just want to encourage you, if you haven't done so already, on your broadcast this Sunday. So whether you're going live or recorded, walk people through it. Have them pick up their phones. In fact, I'll tell you this, we did this last Sunday with some churches. It was really effective. If you have an app, we did a push notification to everyone that actually had the link and you just clicked it and we walked them through it right there. We just took time in the service to do it. If they did not have an app, we sent a mass text. And so pastor said, hey, on your phone, you should have received a text from us. Click that link right now. I'm just going to walk you through this. And so it's so worth your while to do that and actually take time. And then of course you could also package that in a video that you put on social media as well.
Yeah. So lots of options there. Now, let's say we've got churches now that are giving online. Julie, where do we want to go with what's a healthy percentage right now? I mean, is it 40%, 50%, 100%?
Yeah, that is such a difficult question for me to answer because the demographics of every church are so different. So here's what I would just say, kind of going back to that affirmation of some people that are giving by check. It's not wrong to give by check. It's going to be more challenging right now. And so we do want to provide that option for people, but it's really difficult for me to say your goal is 80%, just because some of you, I do want to just encourage you. This has just been my total learning and experience. Some of you do have, whether it's demographics, or I'll even say sometimes it's not about demographics, it's just about what kind of business they're in, and they just prefer to kind of not be on recurring giving. They're in the construction industry and they're going to give you a different amount each month, and that's fine. And so sometimes they just would prefer giving in a different way. So the big thing is to provide easy on-ramps. And during this time of virtual, we've got to be able to do that. I know envelopes sound old school, but they are working. They are totally working. And so let's get as many people online as we can by doing those device links, but don't stress yourselves out or make people feel like it's the end all be all.
Hey, Julie, we've got a great question that was just asked. What about text to give? Are there any tools to use with that you would recommend?
Yeah, Kindred is probably one of the best vendors for that. I will say this, though. I will say, just before all this occurred, text to give has kind of been a declining avenue. Mobile apps has been on the rise, and text to give has it was real hot a couple of years ago. Kiosks were real hot a couple of years ago, and those have kind of declined, to be honest. Now, I will say this, though. One thing that's been really effective with text to give is when you do it in the moment. And so if you don't have the ability either through a push notification, I think that's the best, push notification or mass text, to get people actually on your mobile online giving platform. If you don't have that ability, then in the moment to get people to text 7797 or whatever to be able to give could be very effective for you if you can't do the other. But I will say my experience has been kind of before even all this happened, the text to give has kind of been a declining medium, except for kind of one-time in the moment offering. So some churches were using it for like a flood relief opportunity or something where it was just like, hey, we're going to take this offering right now, text it, it's easy. But as far as ongoing, it's just not, it's better to kind of get people on your online giving platform, either through mobile or laptop.
Okay, so we just had another question. What about, is there a Cash App that we can use?
Yeah, so there is a Cash App called Cash App, and then of course also Venmo. I will say, so I do have some churches that are using those. Coincidentally enough, I've actually had a lot of student ministries even before all this happened that use Cash App and Venmo for students to be able to give. There are a couple of, I'll just tell you, a couple of security concerns people have voiced. I personally have not experienced that. I don't have a lot of experience with that, but I will say, just from some client feedback, some people have said with Venmo and Cash App, they're not quite, I guess there's some not quite as secure as some of the actual online giving platforms. So, but I do have some student ministries using them. I've got a church in Miami that, man, they use Cash App like it's going out of style for their students, and it's been really effective. So I think you could look into that. I think probably, though, the more secure online giving platforms would be better if you're able. That's just been the feedback I've been hearing.
Okay, so Julie, we're kind of in this virtual world now, online. What's the best avenue to continue to communicate financial needs?
It's great. So a couple of things I would say. So first of all, I know everyone is kind of doing a slightly different thing, like on Sunday. So some of you are doing live streams, some of you are pre-recording. I think a lot of you are doing the whole service where you've got worship and everything. I know some are just doing a message. Some as a pastor in his armchair, just sharing a devotional. All of those are wonderful. Here's what I want to encourage you: whatever you're doing, you've got to have an offering moment in every service. So even if you are doing real bare bones, and it's pastor in an armchair sharing from his Bible, with a devotional, we've got to have a moment of giving, just like you're hopefully having a moment of prayer. Some of you I know are even doing communion and encouraging people to find juice and bread and leading people through a time of communion. I've got one church that's mailing communion out to people or offering them to drive by and pick it up. But as far as that sacred moment of offering, it's a moment for you to do a devotional in that moment, encourage people about that giving in that moment, and just to encourage people that, hey, during this time more than ever, we want to be reaching out to our community locally. I know many of us, have commitments to people globally, and this time is not a time we want to release those. And then just being strong as a church. And so it is very possible that in an attender's naivete, they don't know you guys are still working really hard, and that your people are still doing stuff. Some people, I know it's the age-old joke, what do you do Monday through Saturday, Pastor? And they might think that there's not as much going on right now. And so I just want to encourage you. I mean, I didn't know, my own pastor just told me yesterday, we're letting a bunch of churches use our recording equipment right now. And I'm like, you need to tell the church that. That's cool. Like that encourages me in my giving, that I know we're doing that for other churches right now. So be very communicative about the things you're doing. Don't let them just be in the back office. Yes. The second thing I'll just mention about that, Greg, is trying to encourage a lot of churches right now to do a mid-week generosity devotional. So I've seen a lot of you guys out there are doing like daily devos on Facebook Live. A lot of you doing some really creative stuff. It is awesome. And the engagement during the week, you're doing kids and student stuff. It's incredible. So I just want to encourage you maybe to bake into one of those midweek, like a Wednesday or a Thursday, that you make it all about generosity. And it doesn't just have an implication of giving to the church. I think that's one of your applications, of course, and it's an opportunity to say, hey, let's just grab our devices right now, and participate in giving. But in addition to that, it also gives you kind of an application, say in this moment, maybe some of you are going to go across the street and help your elderly neighbor, with her groceries. So I want to encourage you to be strategic in those daily devos, and maybe one a week, you just make it about generosity.
Okay, so I love that, Julie. If you're doing a pre-recorded service online or even live online, would you mention, hey, we're going to be telling you about how to give at the beginning of the service? Would you mention it at the end, or just in that offering time?
Yeah, so I would mention in the offering time, just in that offering time, and then what I would do is I would follow up post service, like with some social media posts, like, hey, if you missed service today, if you're listening, here's a couple ways you can participate. Here's your giving link. Here's your you can click here for the children's curriculum, or if there's something else you're offering them. But I would do it in the moment. I wouldn't do it at the beginning. I think it might hit people a little harsh before they've been engaged in the message and engaged in the worship, but do it in that moment of your offering moment, if it's a few songs in or after your message, but then follow up after the service is over with a couple of posts with the giving link. And then I know many of you do weekly emails. If you're doing some weekly emails, to follow up with that as well.
Okay, what about direct messaging? And what I mean by that is you have different groups in your church. Are you going to communicate differently with each of them? I hate to say this, but we do have groups that, you know, are just dropping something in the offering plate. We have a percentage of people in our churches that are, you know, giving. You can tell almost because it's a tithe because they've got, you know, ... 0.68 cents. And then you have people that have the capacity to give very large gifts, maybe in one time. Do you communicate with them differently directly?
Well, so here's what I would say right now. I think for the next couple of weeks, what I would encourage, and I have a caveat for a couple of you that might be in real dire straits. I've got a couple of churches that just, their giving has sunk and they don't have a lot of reserves, and that might be some of you. So let me address you in just one quick moment. But for everyone else, if you're doing okay financially, I would wait just a couple of more weeks, let this dust settle a little bit more, and just keep communicating collectively, with the exception of that targeted email I told you a little bit ago for check givers. But then in a couple of weeks, I think we can do kind of some targeted asks from some of our high capacity givers to stand in the gap. What I will tell you, I've got a couple of churches right now that just, again, because maybe they're newer or just in a situation where they were in a high spending season because of a new building or something like that. But if that's you and you're like, I don't know if I can pay my staff next week, and it's kind of dire, I want to encourage you. It's okay to reach out to some high capacity givers one-to-one. I want to encourage you to do that. And some of the language that we're using is we're saying, you know, hey, in this time, first of all, we serve a God of grace. And there are some people that have been significantly economically affected by this already. And they're in an industry that, I mean, they don't even know if they're going to have a job, or they already know they're not going to have a job. And so we know that's a reality, and there's probably going to be more added to that pot. We also know in this time, by the grace of God, there's some people that are not affected and that are in an industry that by the grace of God is not going to be affected by this. So we know I don't know what the split's going to be, but there might be just as many in this camp as there is in this camp. And so I just want to encourage, you know, Bob, I don't know your situation, just kind of high capacity. I don't know your situation. But could you pray about, if that's you, could you pray about standing in the gap for this season, maybe a period of 4 to 6 months? And could I ask you to be one that would step up and just be really honest about where you are as a church? And we're wanting to be gracious. We want to serve our community during this time. We don't want to cut back. We want to press in. And the reality is, if our giving keeps going like it is, we're going to have to cut back significantly. And so I do want to encourage you, if that's you and you're in real dire straits, don't be afraid to have that conversation. But if it's not you, I would hold off just a few more weeks and kind of see what happens, and let people just kind of engage online and kind of take kind of more of the mass communication.
Yeah, it's funny, Jill. I was sitting here and you were talking about that conversation with someone to help you through some difficult times, maybe who's high capacity. And I was thinking that is absolutely a conversation I would have face to face. And I'm thinking, but that's not going to happen right now, because so it has to be, but I would absolutely do it face to face on Zoom.
Yes, Greg, you're exactly right.
Yeah, that's not an email. That's not, you know, a text. That is, can we set up a Zoom call? Can we do FaceTime together? Skype, whatever you can use, that needs to be face to face. Hey, Julie, high capacity individuals, one of the fascinating things that I discovered just recently, because, you know, Stadia, we're constantly in financial development mode, was there are certain people out there that this is not going to affect their giving. And here's what I discovered. There are people that have money in what are called donor advised funds. they'll frequently refer to them simply as DAF funds. And I was talking with a very generous investor with Stadia. And I said, look, I know the stock market's tough right now. I was probably setting myself up for failure with that kind of language. But, hey, Stadia, we're being aggressive right now. How do we move the digital church forward? And here's what's going on. And this donor said to me, you know what? It's not even a problem. At the beginning of the year, we put all of our giving funds in a DAF fund. And so we can actually cash it. The market has no effect on it. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, there are some people that the way a donor advised fund works is they make a charitable donate. They've already made a charitable donation into a fund that actually they can't take it out except to give charitably. So they can't have it back. They're not going to get it back. They put it in there. They don't know what charities they're going to give it to yet, but it's in there. And there are people that already have those vehicles. Here would be my encouragement to you as you're talking with individuals. And it's kind of like I was having that fictitious conversation with Bob a second ago. Just be humble and say, Bob, I don't know your situation. Because the truth is, we don't know. We don't know if Bob's going to have to pay for 5 of his sister's kids, meals. And we don't know, even if someone's real high capacity, they might be helping in a big way somewhere else right now. So just be real humble and say, Bob, I don't know your situation, fully. And I don't need to know it fully. But if you do have the ability, could I ask if you would pray about standing in the gap in a significant way for our church over the next 4 to 6 months? And there are people that do have funds that have been set aside that they're not going to be able to get those back for a non-charitable purpose. They're already designated they're already in that fund, and it just is a matter of which charitable entity they're going to.
And I think, Julie, that the communication piece again, and I think there are communications that we do, to large groups and so forth via video, via email, to let people know what the financial situation is. But I think it's extremely important as well. I sent out 2 texts this morning. Both were fairly lengthy to 2 of Stadia's high capacity investors. And it was just simply to say, hey, and this was legit. I'm praying for your family. I was praying for them this morning, that they stay healthy. Here's kind of an update on our family. My mom's in the hospital right now. Appreciate your prayers for that. And that was all legitimate because we have that relationship, right? But then I just went on to say, hey, Stadia has been positioned by God to work out in this digital world. Here's what we're doing. We had 1,000 people on our webinars last week about digital online, and we're still moving forward. And I just want to thank you for your investment, your friendship, and your partnership with Stadia. That's all it was. There was no ask involved whatsoever. But I wanted them to know that Stadia is still moving the ball forward, and we need them.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really appreciate that, Greg. Just even overall with your church right now, like I mentioned a little bit ago, encouraging my pastor to let our church know all the things that our church is doing right now to help bless other churches. It's like we need to know that because it encourages us on what we're already giving. And so that's a really important thing, not just with your high capacity givers, but to communicate, to just say, hey, church, thank you for your giving. It is essential. It's allowing us to do this, because when we make a statement, and I know Greg was even kind of self-catching himself a second ago about saying that, the stock market's down. Don't say any statements that kind of acquiesce to the fact that giving is going to be down. It really does fulfill a self-fulfilling prophecy to be able to say, church, we want to be stronger now than ever. Thank you for being so faithful to give. We know we serve a God of grace and people's situations are all over the map, but I just want to thank you, everything that we're able to do right now. We actually want to step in and do more, to be able to convey that we're not pushing back and tell them, just over communicate the things that you're going to be able to do. And if I know many of you are providing opportunities for your people to engage in that, whether it's some of the shopping for the elderly, some of you are doing the meals for kids in school. I mean, the more we can engage people, whether it's digitally or physically, it helps them to be able to see all the opportunities that we need.
Okay, so I've watched that. I've been talking with lots of our church planters via Zoom call across the country, and I have been blown away by their church's generosity right now. And so, I mean, they're doing it. They're going out, they're packing, they're buying the food, they're packing the meals for kids that, are hungry right now because they're not getting school lunches at this point. They're delivering meals to the elderly, all kinds of wonderful stuff. Julie, how important is it for the church to be generous during this time?
Yeah, I mean, it really does. This is the moment when the church. Somebody said it was not me. It was some genius said, when the world presses stop, the church presses play. Everybody was sharing that on social media last week, and it really is true. This is such a time to step up, and I just want to encourage you. And if you don't take anything else away from this webinar, I want to remind you of a really important passage from the Apostle Paul. In Colossians 1, Colossians is a book, many of you know, it was written to refute heresy. So that letter was written to the church at Colossae about 90 AD to, most scholars think, to refute some heresies, because there was like the telephone game going on. Basically, some people had witnessed Jesus. Some people had heard about those who heard about that they had witnessed him. And so this was about the time when some things were starting to get skewed about the message of Jesus. And people were saying, he's not the way, he's a way to the Father. And you can go to heaven by just ascertaining a certain level of knowledge. It's not, accepting Christ as your Savior. There's lots of heresy. In Colossians 1, the Apostle Paul reminds us of how our lives should be oriented to Christ and who he is. And many of you know this passage. It's the passage of the supremacy of Christ. And in verse 15, Colossians 1, verse 15, he says, he is the image of the invisible God. He's the firstborn over all creation. All things have been created by him, through him, to him, and for him. He's before all things. His blood has been we've been reconciled to him through his blood shed on the cross. This passage is so much an orientation of how our lives need to be. And if you don't take away anything else from what Greg was just kind of teeing up there about how we need to be oriented, the theology of who Christ is in our life, this firstness, is one of the biggest things we can teach our people right now. And not just in serving, but in giving. And I want to encourage you with this. Without us teaching this theology of first, people's giving is just going to get pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed down. And their giving is going to be driven by these other financial priorities. And instead, those financial priorities need to be driven by their decision to give, and for us to be able to make that primary. And it's a huge shift for people, because most people decide what they can give based on their other priorities. That is a leftover model. That is not a first model. To be able to say, okay, Lord, help me give in such a way that everything is by it, to it, through it, and for it. And that the money I spend on food, the money I spend, it's going to be driven by what I've decided to do for the Lord. Because in these types of times, all these other things cause our giving to be like this. And for us to be able to say, no, we need to say, okay, I could give like that, where everything is by it, to it, through it, and for it. And that's just a premise we need to be teaching people right now as they're thinking about their giving.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we found over the years, it's almost counterintuitive that the more we encourage our people to be generous during these times, the more generous they will be with us. So by us saying to our people, hey, go out and buy groceries for your neighbor, go out and, buy the stuff for children and give it away, give to these things. It sounds counterintuitive. Oh my gosh, they're not going to give to the church then. But the exact opposite is true.
Yes. All boats rise. Yes. All boats rise. You're exactly right. The generosity of spirit and of encouraging people to prioritize the things of the Lord, it does not take away from, it adds to. If you are teaching generosity and you're teaching that should be their priority, all boats will rise. Don't have a fear mentality that will take away from your church.
Okay, so let's talk about that, like celebrating finances. Let's say your church is doing well, you're rock solid. Some of us, again, the natural thing is I'm like going, well, gosh, I'm not going to tell the church that, because if I tell them that, they're going to quit giving and give their money elsewhere. What would you say to somebody that's in that situation?
Yeah, so it's really important what you celebrate, so that people know, oh, we're doing way over our budget. Well, the interesting thing about a budget is it's very arbitrary. So it was set in a human sense. And so I would not encourage you to kind of report like budget to actuals whenever you're celebrating giving. I know there's probably a financial team at your church that needs to look at those, but we want to celebrate what we want to cultivate. And I didn't say that. It's probably Rick Warren or Andy Stanley or Greg Nettle. I did not make that up, but celebrate what you want to cultivate. So for example, if we're wanting to cultivate first-time givers, let's share this weekend how many first time givers we had last weekend.
Yeah.
Did you know, ABC Church, that we had 9 or maybe 90 or whatever it is, first time givers, people that had never given to our church before? Can we just celebrate that? In church, I just want to invite you. If you've never given before, maybe today could be your day. This could be your time. You could be like those 9. Similarly, maybe you're sharing how many people gave online. I know some of you, have shared some of those stats. And so we're wanting to share the behavior that we're wanting to cultivate. So celebrate it, to say, I want to let you know we had 25 new households that decided to give online last week. And that's incredible. And I just want to encourage you. This is a tool that's available to you. Obviously, check giving can still be done as well. But in this virtual time, it's something that has served us so well. And so I just want to invite you, into that type of giving. There was a link on your phone, et cetera. So we want to celebrate the types of things that we want to cultivate in giving. And so,
and that is so good, Julie. I just love that. And so if you want generosity in your people, you celebrate generosity, all that's just incredible. Okay. I want to switch gears just a little bit here. Easter's coming up.
Yeah.
Typically, probably the biggest weekend of the year for church attendance and stuff. Wow, it is going to be wacko this year. Just remind the people joining us online, you can ask questions via the chat, because we're going to talk about Easter a little bit. Anything special we should be communicating about Easter this year, Julie?
I mean, I know a lot of you are doing some really creative stuff. Like, I've heard some churches that are going to be making Easter kits available for families, and you can swing by the church and pick them up. I mean, people giving some ideas of things you can do virtually. I think most of us have acquiesced to the fact that more than likely we're going to be virtual for Easter. So I just want to encourage you on that. I know a lot of churches are providing some physical things. You can come by the church and pick it up if you want with your family, or even giving you some ideas of some family Easter kits to do together. But the biggest thing is going to be evangelism. So as we all know, there's people that will come to an Easter service that's the only time that they'll ever come to church. And we don't want to lose that just because we're not meeting physically. And so I know in every city, I was just talking to a client of mine in New York, and they're on lockdown and they can't even invite more than 5 people into their living room. So I get that there's some challenges with that. But if you're in a situation where you're able, whether it's a watch party or whether it's a physical watch party, I just want to encourage you. This is that moment where we really do want to be inviting people, just like we would have physically. And so if we make a meal, or if we do something virtually online with a watch party, but as it relates to giving, I know a lot of you do have a regular rhythm of like a big Easter offering. Some of you do something external to bless people. I want to encourage you, if that's something that's been your normal mode, if you always kind of do that, just continue with that mode, and maybe there's an organization you're partnering with. But I also want to tell you, there's no shame at all in the offering just being for the general ministry of your church, because it's anything but general. And I just want to encourage you that Easter offering and name it. Say, this is our Easter offering. This is a big opportunity for evangelism. We want to be able to do some special things to several that are joining us for the first time. And so we're just praying that this is one of the largest offerings of our year. And a lot of times when you say an expectation statement like that, so some of you do expectation statements with baptisms. I've seen you do it, and I've seen you do it well. We're praying this is the largest baptism service we've ever had. And by the grace of God, it ends up being that, because it causes people individually to kind of say, okay, well, maybe I need to ask somebody, maybe it's my time. And when you say we're praying, and obviously legitimately that would be something you'd want to do, we're praying that this is one of the largest offerings, or the largest offering of our year. It causes people to step up and to say, okay, what can we do? What can we do for this? And no shame. It does not have to be external. Some of us think it has to go to some external ministry in order for it to be sexy or exciting. It doesn't. You are sexy and exciting. I should probably bleep that out. But I'm not looking at any of you. So I'm so sorry how inappropriate that was. But you are exciting. And what the Lord is doing in your ministry right now, it's the lifeblood of everything. And so no shame in having your Easter offering be just for your church. But beef up and let people know what you're doing, because sometimes they don't know the incredible things that are happening. But I just want to encourage you, an expectation statement on that can go a real long way.
Okay, so Julie, there's and I love that, and I agree 110% with that. And then there's this other side of me that says, "Oh my goodness, what an opportunity at Easter! What if we gave the whole offering away? If you have that capacity to say, we're going to take up our largest Easter offering in the history of this church, and we're going to give 100% of it to people in need in our community." Or we're going to do our normal offering. We know that's going to be the biggest that we have of the year, but we're also going to do this other offering to bless people in our community. Okay, so I'm not saying to do it. I'm saying pray about it and do what God tells you to do. Talk about that if people are thinking about doing those kind of things.
Yeah, if you are, obviously, that's especially if it's something, I know some of you have rhythms where you have always done that on Easter, or this is a time when you always give externally. And obviously that's very compelling. It's something that is, going to appeal even to the non-Christ follower, or someone that's still kind of seeking the Lord. And so obviously that is a great option. I do want to encourage you. I know some of you, your reality right now is that you're in a challenging financial time. And I just want to encourage you, there is no shame in your big Easter amazing offering is going to your ministry. And, but the key is communication. And often we do a very poor job at explaining what our general fund is. We call it general. People feel like it's for staff salaries and lights, and the ministry at the food pantry, ABC Faith-Based Food Pantry, sounds so much more exciting. And it's like, you are actually doing some incredible life-changing stuff. Like, just tell people about it better. And so the cool thing about what's happening right now online, and I love it, is there's more of a daily connection that you're having with people. I'm seeing it happen all over social media. It's just incredible. And there's a deeper connection happening because of a higher frequency of connection. And so I do think people are starting to see what you're doing day to day. And so I want to encourage that. Don't just talk with them on Sundays. My friend John Peacock at Mission Church, he's doing this Devo on the 8s, live on the 8s. He's doing every 8 a.m., every 8 p.m. There's a reading, a reflection, a response, and a recipe. And he's, encouraging people to engage. And it has been amazing. They've got worship leaders on there. I know a lot of you are doing incredible similar things, and even bigger things, but just no shame at all in that offering actually being a part of what God's doing through your ministry.
Yeah, and I think I need to clarify, Julie, because just so Stadia, we really work hard at being generous with all of the people we work with our church planters. But during this time, we are also creating an initiative right now, a stewardship development initiative with Stadia, because we're investing resources in moving the ball forward digitally. Awesome. And so, there's no shame in that. We believe this is going to be great work. It's going to be really important work to the future of the church. And so, we are saying, hey, give to Stadia. We have this need right now, and churches need to do the same thing. And I agree with you 100%. Julie, talk about, are there any specific tools, resources, anything else you'd recommend during this time for people?
Yeah, it's a great question. Some of the guys at our team at Generis have been writing a bunch of blogs. Dave Travis and some guys. In fact, I don't know the exact web address. I'll give it to Greg's assistant Angela. She'll post it. And so there's that resource. There's a lot of guys that are some great writers and thinkers that have compiled just a few resources and ideas, and they're doing it daily. And so there'll be daily things on that webpage is a great resource. I know Jeff Reed's been just putting out some incredible things. Yep. But I do want to encourage you. I mean, some of the biggest things I'll post on there too, on the Stadia resources website, a teaching on like seven biblical principles you can teach right now on giving. I cannot say enough. The thing I said at the top of the call is that this is the time to lean in, not to pull away. Churches that I know some of you might, I don't know how many of you are in campaigns right now or not in campaigns, but churches that are in an initiative right now or that are in biblical kind of teaching of giving are faring far better than churches that are not. And so you don't have to do a campaign right now. That's not what I'm saying. Probably not the best thing to start one right now. Not what I'm saying. But you don't need a campaign or anything like that to be able to kind of start teaching biblical stewardship. And you don't need to do a series. It's just things that you can do ongoing, whether it's a weekly Wednesday generosity devo, or whether it's some things you can bake into your Sunday morning. But people need us to lean in right now, not to press back on that.
Okay, so we had a question about the Easter offering, and was that a special offering, or are we hyping up the actual Easter offering on that weekend? And I think we're talking specifically about that weekend offering because it really could be one that propels you through the next several months. So take advantage of that. Julie, we had another question about what if people are giving to a project of the church, but then they're pulling back from the actual general fund or maintenance of the ongoing ministry? What would you say to someone like that?
Yeah. And I don't know if when you say project, if it's something like external mission related or if it's more like building related. I'm not sure on that question. I'll say this. I mean, I'm always very much a fan of like kind of giving, kind of being all together. So if you have like a building fund right now or a debt reduction fund, something like that people have been giving to, there's probably questions right now if that project is still happening. I mean, I'd be more than happy to kind of help with your specific situation if you've got a question on that, because it's very possible people are cutting back because they're like, I don't know if this building's still going to be built. And so there might, not knowing your situation, there might be something kind of happening there, or if I think what the question was, they're giving to that and not to the general fund. Yeah. It's possible that you want to kind of bring them together for this season. It's possible that you want to kind of allocate them together in an undesignated fashion. Again, happy to help you kind of navigate through that.
That's going to go into the one fund approach there.
That's really healthy for a season like this. It could be possible. And if it's a missions thing that's causing them to not give to the general fund, again, I'm not sure what the other project thing is, then it might be that just we need to do a better job of letting them know what's happening in the general fund, and then it's anything but general. But not knowing that specific situation, I'd be happy to speak further into that.
We did have someone that's actually in a campaign. Julie asked just now, during this time, should we just lean on the general fund for a season and not emphasize the campaign, or how much should you keep leaning into the campaign?
Yeah. So if you're in a 2 fund right now, if you're in a 1 fund right now, you are golden, because I just want to encourage you. It is better to be in one than to not, because your giving is prioritized and it's that much more likely that people are going to give. And so that's, if you're in a 1 fund right now, do not stop talking about the campaign. Lean in and kind of help people see that priority. If you are kind of in a 2 fund scenario where you're giving to kind of like a building fund or a debt fund or something else that is extra right now, again, it probably depends a little bit on what the situation of the project is. So I've got one church that had not pressed the green light yet on their construction, and they may not be pressing it. So each individual, it's hard for me to give a blanketed answer to that. I'd be glad to talk specifically. It a little bit has to do with, is the project still happening, or did it already happen and we're paying off debt? But it very well might be we want to bring the 2 things together in this season so that the general fund doesn't suffer.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm getting some questions about Easter specifically, and that we're not going to go into right now. I'll just put a teaser out. Like the kits that people are handing out at Easter for their churches. That's actually, there's an actual name for that. It's called Phygital, Phygetal, and it's creating concrete items as well as online. And it's one of the best things. We use it at Stadia all the time. Stadia is 100% virtual. And so we just plan, so we're going to be talking about that in an upcoming webinar. So there's a tease on how to do Phygital, and so how to get people communion cups and things in their hands, or a cross, a nail from, that represents the nail from the cross, to all your church people's hands, so that when you're doing it online, they can actually interact with you in a physical way. Or it's even things you could have them collect in advance. So lots of stuff. So listen, this is very important. Next Tuesday morning at 11 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, we're having a webinar with an amazing leader who's going to be joining us on what to do with Easter and creative ideas and so forth. Julie, as we kind of wrap this up now, coming to the conclusion of our webinar, anything else that you'd say, you know, we're kind of closing things. Hey, just remember this during this time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, please, any of you, feel free if you want to have a dialogue about your specific situation. I am happy to do that. There's no charge, in case anybody's wondering. I'm your friend. I'm your buddy in this time. I'm your compadre. So just please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help with your situation however I can. But the big thing I would just remember and just encourage you, we got to lean in, not push away. Don't make the decision for people. Our words are so important right now. If we expect less, we will receive less. And so the way in which we expect, the way in which we speak, we want to be full of expectation. Ephesians 3:20, you all know it. We could probably recite it all together. That the Lord would do immeasurably more than we can ask or imagine, you know, according to our faith in Christ Jesus. And it's incredible. If we will just have a bigger expectation. I think a lot of us have really low expectations right now. I know we need to be realistic. I know we need to curb our spending. All those things are real. We need to be tightening our belts. Some of us might need to be reaching out to some high capacity givers, but I just want to encourage you, lean in. Don't press away. And I'm happy to serve any of you in any other conversations.
Okay, so you keep offering. How do people reach you, Julie?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's Julie, Julie, at Generis, Gen as in Nancy, ERIS.com. So just reach out to me. We'll set up a Zoom or a couple of Zooms, whatever you guys need. I'm here to serve you in this time.
And she means it. Julie has been incredible with Stadia. Hey, friends, I'm so grateful for all of your partnership and continuing to move the ball forward. I know we're feeling some angst. We all are. Part of it's financial, part of it's health, part of it's just being locked up in our homes all day, every day. And so I so appreciate you, and we'll be praying for all of you. And I know Julie, thank you. Fast healing with your ankles and so forth. But God bless you all, and look forward to being with you next Tuesday on how we can capitalize on Easter. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.